he states that it's not medically necessary treatment.
That doctor said he's done over 10,000 denials for United, and he didn't usually look at the medical records, he just signed his name.
The company is, according to that story, literally trying to see what it can get away with.
Healthcare is a mess in this country, but to celebrate somebody's death is sickening.
Okay, so let's talk about what caused it is profits. When UnitedHealthcare's claims, when they started allowing more claims, their stock went down 8%. And they have to keep profits up to keep stock up.
The bus came out of Atlanta. It had made 6 or 7 stops, and it took a while for the police to figure out or determine where the actual shooter started, where they hopped on this bus. And then there was a pivotal point when he was speaking to someone in a hotel lobby, he pulled down out of politeness and smiled. He had a face mask on, a COVID-like face mask. But out of politeness, and then that picture got spread all over by the police department. It was the best photo they had of him.
Okay.
And then later he's seen on video on 54th Street and 6th Avenue. And he's pacing back and forth. And that's where UnitedHealthcare's UnitedHealthcare Group is holding its investor conference. Okay. At some point, and this is a very important thing, he goes to a Starbucks, and this made me think about Starbucks now ever since you start studying for this. He purchased a bottle of water and an energy bar before going back to the hotel. And they have him on camera there. Now he shoots Thompson as the executive arrives by himself. And then he just flees. Now, after the text, important, they found on the ammunition the words delay, deny, dispose. And these are insurance terms for when they decline or delay or don't pay on people's healthcare things. So that's the why of all this, right?
There was a movie starring Gerard Butler about, being cut off of healthcare or letting his wife die or something, and he starts murdering people. And basically the plot of Breaking Bad is the same, is a science teacher gets denied coverage and he starts murdering people, but to make money with drugs. And so this is a trope in the American system. We've had bad health coverage for so long. We have a publishing industry around it. We have a movie industry around it. The wife came out publicly and said it's probably somebody who got denied health coverage. She said that to an interviewer day one.
And that's not the case. This is a healthy young man. I don't know his health history. Do you?
Well, I found out by reading into the company. I read about the current CEO of UnitedHealthcare, and I read some of their statements in defense of their actions, and they said that he is not a customer of theirs. He's never been signed up with UnitedHealthcare, and a lot of his grievances are they're saying political in nature.
That's what I figured. He looks just like a healthy kid, right? He doesn't look like he doesn't look like he's ever had a cold.
Well, he says, and this has been corroborated so far, he's had back pain, he has back problems, and so he has had issues with the health insurance, but not specifically United. Do you know how he almost got away with it?
Well, he jumps onto so just finishing through the timeline. He gets on another bus terminal, and it has routes that are to Jersey, routes to Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington. Now, they get the DNA from the fingerprint from the Starbucks purchase, but they don't publicly say who it is. And then he gets caught in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's who this guy is so interesting to me. And I'll tell you why. During September 11th, I remember there's a lot of awareness on terrorism, and a lot of people were reading, and everyone was an expert on it. And I remember I talked to someone in law enforcement, an FBI person that I knew from a place I worked. He was just a customer. And I said, well, what's stopping the suicide bombers from doing that here in the United States? And what he explained to me was, he's a very intelligent man, and he's studied this, he said that there's so many more radical people who are poor in these countries overseas. And that's the kind of people that become trade a life for a life people. He goes, it's not people who have money and have their stuff together. That's very unlikely. And so that's what's unique to me about this young man, because he has an Ivy League education. His families are obviously has of means. Does that make sense?
Yeah, he went to University of Pennsylvania. He was upper middle class. There's the pictures of him on social media are like him on vacation and stuff like that. So
having the most fun ever, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So he is absolutely not what you would think of as desperate. Like, he is not a desperate person. But the originality here and the strangeness of it is how much people are supporting it. So can I reveal sort of the inception of this episode and the holy shit moment where I texted you?
Please.
Okay, so I was following this as a story, the Mangione killing. He shot Brian Thompson, and pretty much right away something felt different. The amount of support he was getting online, and the amount of support he was getting from Twitter, and the amount of people who were texting. And we're not the only ones that noticed it. News agencies weren't the only ones that noticed that their headlines that were condemning the killing were not getting clicks, and people didn't care. But the ones that were saying, Luigi, let's look into this. What did UnitedHealthcare do to deserve this? Or Thompson, the victim. And as headlines shifted, Axios put out a poll. Axios is a data polling website. And they put out a poll to 1,000 registered voters, and they got responses back saying, who here thinks the UnitedHealthcare CEO killing was acceptable or somewhat acceptable by age? And again, this has never happened. JFK's murder, or the attempted murder of Reagan, they almost everybody in the U.S. was like, that's abominable. We shouldn't be killing people. We have a civilization. This was so different and so shocking. When I saw the numbers, I was like, you can't be serious. Like this can't be how Americans feel right now. So we'll start with it. It's broken down by age group. And that usually wouldn't be relevant. Usually we'd be just talking about who is okay with murder, the percentage of Americans. But this is important because it is different ages think very differently about whether or not Luigi was justified in murdering somebody in cold blood. I probably would have assumed, because we've done so many episodes about assassins, that younger people are okay with it, or at least they think murder is justified sometimes. Did this shock you to find out that half of everybody under age 30 was okay with this?
That just seems super high. I would think just good old core values are, thou shalt not kill.
I don't know if there is a lack of morals or lack of religion or lack of something in the youth, or if the youth just doesn't believe in, under 30. So we're not talking about 18-year-olds or high schoolers. It's now these are people who are working age and they're currently in the workforce. And it's that's how few people believe that the American system can correct itself, that can do the right thing, that we will ever get justice the way we need it. And that's kind of my takeaway. I didn't think 40% or 50% of young people are amoral a-holes that are running around Mad Max style, shooting pistols at each other. I didn't take this as this is such a high percentage of people who are ready to do murder or ready for the purge to happen. I took this as that's the amount of people who don't have faith that we can correct this without vigilante justice. Now, do you think that the number would go up with age, that older people might be more sympathetic, or maybe they'd have more hope for America to return to what it used to be?
Well, I think if we're talking about the cause itself, first of all, I think it's an extreme. It's one thing to start an Instagram page combating this guy, which would seem more likely to me for this guy to take this jump from, and is there a group or is there some group of people? How do you get yourself? I would need some group of people to be part of some sort of gang to be able to do this, I think. And I consider myself pretty mean individual. You know, he's not like he's a special forces Navy SEAL or something. You know what I mean? He just doesn't look like a killer. And I know they never do, but to answer your question, I'm getting off point. I would think that the people people with less means, older, who have had the health stuff that we talked about in detail. I don't know if you remember the episode we talked about. The Attorney General was having problems with medical billing. The Attorney General of the United States was being overcharged thousands of dollars for a routine thing.
Bag of saline, yeah.
Yeah. So I would think the people who in the 50 to 59, the one that's the lowest, only 8%, which still seems high.
Yeah.
But it's not 41. It's not half,
Yeah, let's read out these numbers real quick so everyone knows like the age breakdown. So like we said, 18 to 30, 41%, almost half of people supported the shooting. 30 to 39, so like close to my age bracket, the millennials and elder millennials, closer to 23%. So nearly a quarter of Americans in that age bracket were like, yeah, it's justified. 40 to 49, it drops to 13% of support. Age 50 to 59, it's down to 8%. And then it kind of slowly starts to go up again. 60 to 69, it's at 9%, and 70 or more, it's at 11%. So 1 in 10 of the older generation. So that tells me that, I mean, like my internal monologue is like, well, of course the oldest people in society support this. They deal with medical coverage every day. Like they constantly have to fight this. So, but that may be wrong of me. It may be that like, maybe that's a generation. Like we had an episode about Ken McElroy, a guy who like was a bully to his whole town, and the oldest people in town got together and shot him dead. And I'm like, well, maybe it's the oldest generation is grittier. Like maybe they are like more in that mindset of like, yeah, take care of your own kind of thing. Or maybe it is because they're just like constantly battling with insurance. Now, do you want to reveal how we feel about this? Where would we be on this poll that Axios put out?
You mean age-wise or how you feel?
How you feel?
I don't think it's okay. So I would be in the I guess the majority for my age. So I'm in the age group with the lowest. It's only 1% lowest. The 50 to 59-year-olds.
Okay.
And I'm guessing you're in the 18 to 29-year-olds. I'm almost starting to suspect you had a hand in this.
I am.
You're so enthusiastic about this. I'm thinking you may have had something to do.
I'm just happy they caught the wrong man. It was me. No, I think the best way to put this into words is, I think that I want to live in a society where there is legal protection, and I want to live in a society where civilization is just, and that you don't have to have vigilante justice. I don't think this was a good thing. Like, I don't look at this as an overall net positive. Like, a lot of people online are like, well, yeah, he got what he deserved. I'm like, well, he may have, but I don't want to live in that society that is willing to let rogue people or people unassociated with the justice system to say what you deserve or not. I don't think that's a good society to live in. However, I will say with a giant asterisk, there aren't really any means right now for the general public to change laws or policies in the way that they should be able to. If we're talking about okay, the alternative to vigilante justice is you do it legally, you do it with votes, you do it with support, you grassroots it, you drum up support with laws, and you drum up support with politicians, and you go the correct route. We're going to explain here really quickly why the correct route doesn't work and it doesn't exist. Like I am in favor of basically French style revolutionary guillotines because of how unapproachable laws have become, and how unchangeable things are in the way they favor corporations.
Well, yeah, I can tell you this. You know how they make a street sign, stop sign, into a street light? Do you know what has to happen?
No, what's that?
It's a number of fatalities. So a certain number of people, and they don't tell the general public what it is, whether it's 5 or whether it's 15. But when 5 people die at this stop sign, they have to make it a stop light. So to your point, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Change doesn't happen until somebody significant dies, or there's, right?
I think that is basically the point I'm getting at, and that. Okay, well let's start with like who thinks this is moral or not. I think, to answer your question, yes, that is an extremely good way of putting it. Like your stop sign analogy works, except that it is the amount of innocent rich people who have to die before this becomes enough public outrage. Like the awareness we're trying to raise isn't that the medical system is awful. The awareness we are trying to raise is that the medical system cannot be changed by you and me. And Mangione, I don't think he even intended that. Like his manuscript or manifesto, he says in there that he is not an expert and he's not equipped enough to explain the issue. Like he weirdly is humble in his manifesto, which is funny. And it's true. Like that's why he shouldn't have been the shooter. That's why this was not the way to do it, is because he wasn't equipped for it, and he wasn't equipped to judge it in that sense.
But I think the anger with this Brian Thompson, the man who was assassinated, was that he's making, who knows, $23 million, let's say, and he's having processes in place that he knows about that's denying coverage to people who are losing their life, and he's eating steak and staying in 5-star hotels and on jets, right? Like
right.
This life of gluttony,
Okay, so this is where I wanted to get to. Let's talk about the money question. Are you willing to go down the financial rabbit hole with me? Because the old adage, follow the money, very, very much applies to this case.
Please, yeah.
To answer our question of, are we okay with a society that supports moral murder? And the governor of Pennsylvania himself, Shapiro, says absolutely not.
Hear me on this. He is no hero. The real hero in this story is the person who called 911 at McDonald's.
But then the alternate question, the throwback or the clapback that most people have is, well, isn't that what the medical industry does every day? When they deny coverage, isn't that a type of moral murder? When we deny coverage to people who need it to save their life, or at least to extend their life, like people die of complications every day because they didn't get coverage. Isn't that a type of moral murder where we decide they didn't deserve it because they didn't work the right type of job or have the right type of coverage? Didn't they deserve it because morally they hadn't earned it? So that is the question that everybody on Twitter is asking, and that's the question everybody is fighting back against, which is, on the one hand, you have somebody who people are saying morally killed another human. On the other hand, you say, well, Brian Thompson morally killed hundreds, if not thousands of people. So I followed the money. I wanted to know, how much was Brian Thompson making for his company? How much was his life worth in monetary value? Why are CEOs currently taking his side versus the general Twitter public who is taking Mangione's side? First off, did you know that the UnitedHealthcare group was brought before the House Finance Committee this year, right before the murder, actually.
No, I didn't. And they had some pending charges or some questions.
Oh, so many questions. So, first off, it's like, well, are they actually doing moral murder? Well, moral murder and also all kinds of financial crimes that justify needing a Brian Thompson. They need these CEOs because they're able to, like, they're very, very good at, like, getting their company out of hot water. The current acting CEO of the UnitedHealthcare Group was brought before the House, and it was a matter of hacking. They had been hacked. They paid a ransom to their hackers. So, like, they didn't quite reveal how many people got leaked. And then when they did, it was shocking. Like, it was, you may have gotten a letter in the mail if you're with UnitedHealthcare saying that they had a data breach. And the company, UnitedHealthcare, paid the hackers $22 million. And the reason why they were willing to pay the money, and also the reason why they got hacked, is they didn't use, it's a stupid, it's user error. It's dumb. They just didn't use two-factor authentication to log into their own servers. So, like, the largest healthcare industry in the world right now, or in America, UnitedHealthcare, they're so big. They're like the 11th largest company in the world total by revenue. If we measure by revenue, they're the 11th largest in the world. They got hacked because they didn't use two-factor authentication. Now, during this data breach, so, like, they were brought before the House committee because of the data breach. So they're like, march to Capitol Hill.
They need to have things in place for that kind of information, right?
Right. And they should have been transparent, and they should have told everybody, hey, we lost your data. Yeah, they did a lot of things wrong. And while they were being investigated for this by the public, I believe Wall Street Journal published something about this, or found out about it. They were using their own data breach to undermine and buy smaller hospitals at an expedited rate. So the way this worked out is UnitedHealthcare gets hacked, their data gets breached, and hackers have, your and my social security, our medical history, our everything. And so UnitedHealthcare pays the hackers and then turns around to the smaller hospitals that were affected by this, like the ones who, like, contracted through them or worked with them or had patients that were crossed over to them. And so they went to these smaller hospitals and said, hey, you got hacked too. We actually made a deal with the hackers. We have the key to your, we have a solution. And by offering quicker solutions and support to the hospitals that also got hacked during this, they effectively made themselves the rescuer and were able to negotiate favorable acquisition terms. So, like, they went to the hospitals that they caused to basically weaken and start going under. And they're like, hey, we'll rescue you. Like, that's crazy.
It's not fair.
Yeah. But that is an absolute drop in the bucket. Like, when we talk about how much money UnitedHealthcare has stolen from the American public, I remember somebody on Fox News was saying that what they do is justified as far as, like, rejecting claims, because these are people with pre-existing conditions or conditions that are the responsibility of the person who has the condition, not the hospital taking care of you. That you should know, like, what your insurance will cover, and you should look over your paperwork and things like that. That tune changed really, really quickly when it was revealed by the Department of Justice that they were under investigation for upcoding and wrongful billing. So right off the bat, Fox News was like, it's justified to be a billionaire CEO in America. It's fine. And then pretty much the next day, the Department of Justice and the Wall Street Journal were like, actually, they're under investigation for upcoding. And of their $22 billion in pure profit from last year, 3.7 of that billion was from upcoding alone in just 1 year. So it's like a massive, massive slab of their profit was made by upcoding. Is when, if you walk in with a cane and I write on your chart, I'm your doctor, and I've been told to make more money. I write on my chart, not just the thing you came in for. You came in for pneumonia, And I also write that you have cardiovascular issues because I see that you are walking with a cane. I don't diagnose it. I don't do anything for it. I don't even consult you. I just write on your chart that, cardiovascular disease, also seen to, like we did something about that. That's upcoding. And it slips past a lot of billing. Like it slips past the people who came into the hospital. They just sign it or send it off to insurance. So they're under crazy investigation for buying up other hospitals, for becoming. I think one of the. By the way, this investigation was bipartisan. Both right and left absolutely raked UnitedHealthcare over the coals. It's a fun. It's like it's crazy how many House committee things I've had to watch for our podcast, but this is one of the fun ones because they're just absolutely trashing the CEO and making UnitedHealthcare look stupid. But in the end, it doesn't matter because they have so much money. I mean, they upcoded for $3.7 billion. They're willing to pay out tens of millions to hackers. Like, none of this matters because they have made so much profit. They're an unstoppable profit monster. And Elizabeth Warren called them a monopoly on steroids, which, looking at how much they've acquired in just a couple of years, how much of the health industry they own, it looks like it. Like it looks to me like an absolute monopoly.
It seems like, I have personal experience of this. My ex, she was an RN and she worked for an insurance company. And what she would do is when doctors would order MRIs or whatever whatever the treatment or whatever diagnostic stuff they had to do for the patient, because she had patient care, she worked for the insurance company and she would call and debate, spiritedly debate, say, well, why did you order this before this? And so it gets gray, it gets muddy because the physicians and the nurses are trying to get the best care for their patients, but the insurance is only going to pay for it in a certain rhythm, a certain way. So it gets hard to do your job when you can't do all of your job because it's not going to be paid for. So you have to start doing things that, and you can see how that would just kind of muck up the water a little bit.
Yeah, and I've now I've watched videos of doctors who have to go on camera, like they have to get on a webcam call with the insurer, and they fight for their patients. They have to literally call and fight for them verbally and like scream at somebody and say, if they don't get this medication, they will die. And the insurance company is arguing back, no, our paperwork says that they won't die. They won't be fine, but they will survive, and it's an unnecessary treatment. So and this is an everyday fight.
And there is, and that's not to say that there isn't huge amount of fraud from doctors as well, for years. So it's a bad system. It needs to be cleaned up. But if UnitedHealthcare can have so much money, they can fuck up as much as they want, right?
Yeah, and that's it. Is it's funny, these CEOs probably make a very small amount compared to the people who hold shares through UnitedHealthcare. I mean, they're still millionaires, but they're not billionaires. Luigi Mangione shoots the CEO Brian Thompson, who is worth $40 million or something like that. Hold on, let me look it up just so I'm not. Yeah, $43 million. But in reality, some of the board members are billionaires, and
he will be too eventually if he would have lived, right? I mean,
yeah,
you're in that position. He's a young man still. He's good to make nothing but money. Even if he gets fired, he'll probably get $200 million compensation.
Right. And if anyone wants to defend UnitedHealthcare board members, like anybody who makes $1 billion by investing in health coverage, it's well, they were smart. They were a go-getter businessmen. They deserve $1 billion because they chose the right stocks and things like that. That's not how it works. There is no amount of actual physical work you can do. There's no such thing as an honest day's labor in $1 billion. To give you some idea, if you were okay, I know that labor is different person to person. If you are extraordinarily skilled, you should get an extraordinary amount of money. So I will ask you, Todd, if you were the most skilled person on earth, what is an adequate payment for a day's work from you?
If you're the best in the business or a median,
Yeah, best, the absolute best. Like you're literally the number one in the business. What's a good, an honest day's pay for you?
I would say $2,500 a day.
Okay. I went super high in my estimation. Like I was like, what if it was 10,000? What if I was the best writer in the world or the best speaker in the world or something?
Your time would be worth that, right? I'll give you that 10 grand. Yeah.
Or like rock stars, they go to concerts and they make, tens of thousands of dollars if they're like packing the seats of a stadium or something, and they're putting on the most effort a human can put on. Hypothetically, if I paid you, let's say that you do the best day's work, honest day's work every single day of your life, literally from 18 to 80, like from age 18, the moment you can work, to 80, let's say you retire at 80. If I paid you $20,000 per day to do a job every day of your life, even on weekends and holidays, it would still only be $500 million. So there's no amount of like a billionaire shareholder deserving their billions. That's not true. Like it has nothing to do with the hardest day's work or adequate pay.
I don't have a problem with the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, the people who created industries and businesses that make that money. So that's why they have that money. But when you're a college person who, to me, it just seems like, these CEOs who aren't the founders seem like frauds to me.
Well, that is by and large what it seems to be. We have a chapter in our book about how billionaires make their money, and one of the things we investigate is about less than half of them made their money the way you're talking about, which is found a company, do the work, invest, build something amazing for the American economy. The majority are born into it. They just invest the money wisely from their parents. They're very careful about avoiding taxes. They're very careful about getting into the correct loopholes to exploit labor. I know I am sounding like I am left-leaning. Politically, I am not. But what I do believe is that we are in a system where you can't really get to $1 billion without exploiting a group of people and underpaying them. We have episodes about Jeff Bezos and the Amazon factories and like how they set the pace for the payment and how the hidden minimum wage in America is the amount that a box mover at Amazon makes, not the actual federal minimum wage. So, and I'm not the only one that thinks the system is totally broken, by the way. Not just the system of billionaires, but also the system of health coverage and how we treat it as a commodity and how we move it. The CEO of UnitedHealthcare himself said that the health system is as broken as it can be. I'm going to read a quote from him real quick. And this was in his op-ed that he wrote for, I think, the New York Times. He said, quote, "We know the health system does not work as it should, and we understand people's frustrations with it." He said, "No one would design a system like the one we have, and no one did. This is a patchwork built over decades. Our mission is to make it work better." And the headline was, "The healthcare system is flawed. Let's fix it." So my big question that I asked before is, who can fix it? Like he says, let's fix it. He's using the royal let's, like he's saying, let's all as Americans fix this healthcare system. But he's also at the head of the company that is harvesting, a couple billion a year, just only from their practice of overbilling people. Several of those billion come from also acquiring other companies, controlling the entire supply chain, controlling the doctor chain. So why can't we pass laws to change this? I was wondering, Todd, have you ever signed a petition form on the train or like on the bus or when somebody shows up with a petition clipboard downtown. Have you ever put your signature on one?
I have done those. I had a buddy that used to do that for a job, so I always try to support them.
I do too. I frequently if I
they get like $2 a signature, so you're helping those people out. They work very hard. That's not an easy job. A lot of rejection.
Yeah. I that's my problem is like I'm not doing it to support them. I'm an introvert. So like if somebody asks me to sign something so they'll stop talking.
It makes you so uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I'm
it's
in.
like those Girl Scout cookies. It just seems like a racket, you know. You just can't say no. Say no to the parents, it's not the little kids.
Yeah. If a Girl Scout is asking for things, I will cry before they will. just simply from our interaction. No, if you ever want to try to change a law or change how the healthcare system works, there's you can't get it on one of those petitions. You can't start at the grassroots. You can't really move it as a voter. And the reason why is the history of employment requirements and state laws. So we're going to go back to 1973. The Healthcare Maintenance Organization Act, the HMO Act. Everybody knows what an HMO is. We forget what it stands for. It's Healthcare Maintenance Organization. In 73, it made employer requirements a thing. It basically required employers to offer an HMO option in their healthcare benefits plans. There's also the Employee Retirement Income Securities Act of 1974, ERISA. I don't know how to pronounce that acronym. I've only read it. But it prevents state laws from altering employee-sponsored health insurance policies by preempting them, which effectively creates a federal standard for these plans. To put that into layman's speak, if you take those both of those acts together, one was passed right after the other, like 73 and 74. It basically means that they have to list an insurance, they have to include an HMO, and also states can't change that. So any real significant change, and this is something that everybody kind of knows. Like I know I probably am saying some no dust stuff right now, but any change whatsoever really has to occur at the federal level through Congress specifically. I don't know if there's any other business that has that kind of protection outside of the military. Like, can you imagine your construction business if I was like, what if a state can't regulate you or like not regulate you, but what if a state can't decide not to include you?
Right.
Like, what if everybody who goes to work has to be like, here's the people that are going to work on my house if things go wrong, and you can't not check a box.
You know what I think this is? I think you're touching on where the disconnect might be in this age thing. I think the older generation, which I'm a part of, unfortunately now, they're used to insurance not paying.
Yeah.
And they realize that that's just the way it is, and that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it's always going to be. And the fairness thing is kind of out the window. I almost think it feels like with like homeowners and car insurance, they've actually gotten better at paying and less sneaky than they used to be. But does that make sense?
Actually, I've never considered that, but I think you're right. I also wonder if it's because home insurance and car insurance do not have the same protections at the federal level. Like,
right. It's not as lucrative. It's not.
Yeah.
As,
I wonder if they can't be as sneaky because they
it's
know
not as gray, right?
It's, yeah. The state won't come down on them. Because if your car gets if somebody slams into you and totals your car, and you go to your insurance and say, "Hey, I need a payment," and they're like, "Nope, it's your fault." You can lobby that. Like you can like start, you can first go to law enforcement, and then you can go to lawyers, and then you can start like eventually you can work your way into, let's create new laws. Let's make it to where, there's a check and balance. Like who's going to audit these insurance companies? Who's going to tell, was it Geico that they did wrong, that they can't be the monolith of car insurance.
And I see that you're building it up, that this is just this big circle that's going to keep this hamster wheel that's never going to unless it gets blown up.
Well, yeah, that's where we're at. Is if we cannot change the medical billing system by you and I, like us, we voters, if there's no amount of local voters we can rally together. Say we literally got every single person in town to talk with us about the healthcare system. Like the CEO of United said in his op-ed, the healthcare system is flawed. Let's fix it. Who the fuck is he talking to? Because if you and I got every single person we know or who listens to us to petition against them or to try to start a law or really almost anything, there's nothing we can do. There is, it is down to Congress and it is down to politicians to be willing to challenge that or make that switch. And there's a huge problem with that because campaign contributions. Now we get to why the average person cannot change the healthcare system. We can't vote with our dollar because it's required that we have healthcare and it's required that we get it through our job. We cannot change it by policy. We cannot change it by lobbying. We can't circulate clipboards on a bus and get signatures. What we have to do is we have to call our Congress people, and they have been given the most amount of money of anybody who's ever been given money in politics to not change this. The politicians who would normally be changing these laws have currently been given $4 million in campaign contributions, and that was this year. And I think they spent $16 million on lobbying in the past 2 years. We had a episode long ago about how cheap it is to buy a politician. You can like it was how much money do they have to receive before it actually sways their vote by lobbyists, and it was like it was a really cool data set. I'll try to dig that up and put that in the link for our episode. But it was shockingly cheap. Like you can get somebody to vote on something that is against their party for about the cost of a house. It was like $300,000 to $400,000.
So for $4 million, you're overpaying, right? You're safe,
right? That
almost buys your next election, right? So like, all right.
Yeah. I think because I just read the numbers, I may have made it more murky than I needed to. What I mean by $4 million in campaign contributions, that's $4 million directly to politicians, where you go up to somebody and say, hey, I need you to vote to keep healthcare as impenetrable as it is, and hand them several $100,000 when it only takes,
right,
a couple $100,000.
It's overkill.
Yeah. They've pumped $4 million in the last year or two into Congress, and they've put 16 million toward lobbying. So like,
and then that becomes your priority one as a politician, right? I mean, everything else pales in comparison to that, buddy.
Right, exactly.
You could just make that bad decision and then make all the other good decisions. He's paying for other things too, right?
Right. So if money is the reason why the laws haven't changed around medical billing, then what do you and I do? Like, what does the average citizen do? And the people who say that, that were on the news the next day after the shooting, they said, I don't want to live in a lawless world. Well, the problem is the laws are being written by the healthcare company. I mean, in a very serious sense, they write, a lobbyist is paid a couple million. They're paid to write something that looks like a law, present it to a congressperson and say, hey, wouldn't this be cool if this was in effect? And then here's also $500,000 to your campaign. And they slide that piece of paper over, and suddenly a politician is like, I have something ready for the I have something ready to present. Like I have homework. Like here's my homework, and it's so it is out of our hands at the local and state level, is what I'm trying to say. That was a very rabbit holey follow the money way of saying that it is actually out of our hands. That it's a very rare instance where I won't say that we can do something. We actually kind of can't in this instance, except for contacting our congressmen, holding politicians accountable, passing laws that mean that they can't be paid personally by lobbyists to pass laws that favor health coverage. It's hard to get to that point, by the way. Like it's hard to start writing for an episode like what we're doing and want to live in a just society where this isn't necessary or even acceptable, But after reading about how much money was put into Congress pockets and politician pockets, and like how you can't actually physically change laws around UnitedHealthcare at our level, I was like, oh, okay, no, there actually isn't anything we can do.
This almost reminds me of like the story arc of this goes all the way to the top, right?
Yeah.
There's government officials. So then how do you connect those dots and say, okay, who's responsible, right? Is the company responsible because they're getting away with it, or is it because people are allowing, politicians and the laws are allowing them to do this?
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to, is there are so many times that we will say during this podcast that the general public wants this, so it shall be. Like, we, the general public, may have a misconception or we may have a bad idea, but we're going to do it because we have the majority and we have the voice. That's not the case here. A very small amount of people are getting a hell of a lot of money, and they're making decisions for everyone else in a very, very obviously and evidently corrupt way. And we're okay with it because we like the idea of lobbyists, and we like the idea of huge corporate donors being able to pay our politicians, which to me sounds crazy and stupid, but it's great when it's on your side. That's the only thing it's the only defense of lobbyism and this much money being paid to politicians as I can think of. Yes, we will have healthcare systems that kill us, and yes, we will have Kraft snackables being put into our kids' lunches and killing them with sodium. But that also means that our favorite super PAC can pay our favorite politician, and our side wins. Yay, red or blue team. Like it. I hate it when it gets political. Like I knew this was going to get political. I want it to just be about the medical system and the murder and sexy, fun things to talk about. But
I don't think it's political unless you go both ways, right? Unless you start going by one side. So you're still staying between the lines and saying that it's both sides, blue and red.
Yeah,
it's not just one.
Oh, it very much is. Like I do. There are times where I will be following a voting cycle or like a presidential cycle, and I will hear that a massive company like Elon Musk is donating the most amount of money to Trump's campaign as possible. And I'm like, oh, wow, he has Elon on his side. Like I don't think, isn't that the most corrupt thing ever? I think, wow, that's crazy. Like he's got such a big player behind him. I think of it almost in sports terms. I'm like, oh, he's got this, like he's got the biggest quarterback in the league behind him now.
Right.
And I think of it.
It's like recruiting for a sports team. You pay the highest salary, you should get the best, right?
Right. And same thing with, politicians on the other side. If Joe Biden is like, I have this massive super PAC of these companies that support me, I'm like, wow, that's weird that you got those backers. Like your team is winning. But no, it's we shouldn't think of it in terms of winning and teams and things like that. It should just be like, oh God, we all lose if that much money goes into politics. Like just full stop.
Well, yeah, and then I think the thing is when someone's getting sick and dying out of just not being taken care of in a first world country, when there's examples all over the world of places with much better health care, with less resources than when it's just not being distributed. If the money's not being used to help sick, it's being used to get people richer and politicians to get richer. It's very sad.
To put things into perspective on the amount of spending UnitedHealthcare did, you quoted Robin Williams once during one of our episodes and said that Robin Williams made the joke that politicians should be like NASCAR drivers. They have to wear a jacket that has all their sponsors listed on the jacket, like so people know who bought them.
Exactly.
Almost every politician currently in office would have UnitedHealthcare's name on the back of their jackets.
Isn't that funny? Yeah.
The millions that they have spent, you would see many congresspeople and many high-end politicians with UnitedHealthcare, like the decal on their car and the decal on their jacket.
Like the Hells Angels jackets. It would be number one. It's more than that, the most popular by far.
Yeah. And this probably became evident to the public before it became evident to me. I'm speaking from a place of negligence and ignorance. I did not realize how unchangeable the system was from the bottom. I always think that, we could get together enough people, we could change a law. That's not the case here. There are smart young people on who are on Twitter or X right now, and they're trying to do this network of jury nullification. So let's start with, have you heard of the term jury nullification?
No, what does that mean?
In Canada, they had a spate of nullified jury pools where a bunch of doctors were going to court because they had given abortions and it was against the law. And in Canada, they were like, okay, we'll prosecute you. Juries would gather and the jury would all decide like unanimously, yes, this doctor performed an abortion. It was against the law, but we support what they did on moral basis. And so they would declare a nullified trial or nullification. It's basically the jury saying that yes, they did something wrong, but it was also morally justified. We're not going to render a verdict. We're not gonna put them in prison. We're not gonna sentence them.
Kind of like the euthanasia doctors as well. Makes sense, right?
Yeah. Same thing has happened in several different types of cases, but they don't talk about that if you go to jury duty. If you ever arrive at jury duty and you wait there for 3 hours before they actually call your name and send you to a sweaty jury box, no one ever tells you, by the way, if you think that what that bad person did is actually morally right, you can nullify this whole process and basically thumb your nose at the legal system. And it is legal to do that. It is okay for a jury to do that. They have that right. It is not publicized in the US and it's not something people talk about, which is why this headline from the Daily Mail showed up. Warped Gen Z influencers urge jurors to acquit Luigi Mangione. And it's all about jury nullification. It's people trying to get out the word that if you are on the trial for Luigi, you should try to nullify it. You should try to nullify it and say that he was morally correct and in the right. And God help them if they get a young enough jury, because that could happen. Like if they happen to, through random selection, get, I don't know how many people are on a grand jury. Is it 16 or something, 20? But if they get all young people, they may end up with a jury nullification where they say, yes, he murdered, but he murdered morally. Also, ironically, in that same period of time, in July, did you hear about the protests that had happened at the UnitedHealthcare Center?
That seemed like that was after or before?
That was before.
Okay, so that seems
that may also be after
the step. You know what I mean? A step in before you go kill people.
Yeah. I mean, we're almost like
peaceful protest, and then the violent protest,
then the murder.
Yeah.
I almost feel like this is like a documentary where we're like, here's all of the bad things happening with United before the murder happens. There were like 100 or so people gathered outside the Minnesota headquarters, and they were there to protest against the insurance firm's policies and denial of patients. And they were specifically putting prior authorization on signs and things like that, because prior authorization allows companies to review suggested treatments before agreeing to pay them. So like it's another way to delay, basically.
Yeah.
And ironically enough, the police showed up and they, of course, arrested protesters. They didn't do anything about like there are people are showing up to the protest and they're like, my aunt just got killed by this health insurance company, or my dad, just died from diabetes because they were doing this prior authorization shit. And 11 of the protesters were arrested, and they weren't in. I don't know if they were blocking traffic. I remember reading the article and being like, oh, they weren't damaging anything. They weren't doing anything that would otherwise constitute something other than a protest. Like they weren't rioting, and the police still arrested about a dozen of them. Now I had a question, which is, do you think this murder will change the behavior of any of the CEOs?
Well, I would think that if you're in certain industries, you would be especially there's other healthcare people, right? I would think so. Yeah. I would think that you'd get security. You get, I always think of like Joel Osteen, the pastor for that big church in Texas. I've seen his bodyguards, and they look like offensive linemen in the NFL. I'd get a bunch of those guys.
It's funny you say that, because that was my first thought, is the moment the shooting happened, I had two thoughts, and I think it's just because like I was in different security companies throughout my life. My first thought was, I don't want to live in that world where this is normal. My second thought was, oh wow, CEOs are about to be armored up. They're about to be rolling around like rappers. Like they're going to be rolling around with like 50 bodyguards and like all wearing gold chains.
I kind of think they already should be, and I'll tell you why. I mean, I'm almost disgusted that they eat at the same places I do and have the same dangers that I do. You know what I mean? I think they're worth so much. You would think you'd have some goons around you, just keeping an eye on you.
Yeah.
Right? If you were the person's significant other or family member, you can't let the golden goose get killed.
Right. There is a great picture of Elon Musk running around with 20 bodyguards all at the same time, and they're all just surrounding him. And they're like, they look like some of them are from like men's modeling magazines. Like they're all in suits, every single one of them. Like a lot of them were wearing glasses. It's amazing. But yes, I think that's the case. There's a guy, Philip Klein, who runs a Texas-based investigations company, and they have protected Thompson in the past. He gave a speech in early 2000s, and the Klein company protected him. And they said they're astonished that the executive didn't have security for this trip to New York, that he would go to New York and walk on the street without somebody saying, you know, Mr. President, get down, and throwing themselves at him. He's like, this is shocking. Like, why would a CEO? He's like, the more shocking thing isn't that somebody would go up in New York and shoot him. The more shocking thing is he didn't have tons of security around him. And I think that's where we're getting to is, you know, CEOs are starting to, like, they saw this as a wake-up call. There have been more interest in the industry of, like, you know, hiring bodyguards, getting bulletproof cars, getting armored up, basically. And that's kind of the way I see things going, is like we're heading more toward a future where it's not that these people get any more sympathetic, and it's not that we can change laws either. It's not like the shooting is going to make it to where, okay, now states can dictate healthcare laws. That's not what's happening. What's happening is we're just making people more separate, more defended, more armored, like entrenching.
And I think, I don't know, socially, tell me if you agree with this, and this is my theory. I think countries that are like third world, second world, where there's been a lack of a middle class, there's never been a middle class. I think the poor people are less likely to go after kings, queens, billionaires than in this country. I think there would be people that would be more bold and more violent.
Yeah.
And would look for the opportunity to kill somebody significant and not be afraid, like this kid.
I think we are unique in that respect. And that's actually kind of what I was thinking about when this happened was, oh, we might eventually turn into one of those countries. We, you know, when there's a country where there's always been palace guards around the nobility, or there's always been security around the aristocrats, or now there's always going to be armored cars and security standing between us and CEOs. That feels like where we're headed. It feels like we are just late to the party of the untouchables now are behind bulletproof glass all the time. You know, we like to be the America where Henry Ford can go out with his like the person working his auto line and have lunch with him and ask him questions about the efficiency of his factory and things like that.
Yeah,
we're not going to live in that world very long. Like, well,
no, you're absolutely right. And then there was the Google thing where the CEO is on the floor in a polo shirt playing foosball with everybody, and he wants to be on, you know, feel the heartbeat of the company, as opposed to the behind five secretaries, you know.
Right. As opposed to the CEO of Lehman Brothers, who left his office in a private elevator every day and took a private car and only had to walk 3 steps between his car and his like armored elevator, and people never saw him except when he was in the building, and yeah, crazy shit like that.
Except when he was motherfucking them.
Yeah. We will stop at some point. The phrase oligarchs is being thrown around a lot recently in regards to wealthy CEOs. I don't think of it as oligarchs. Soon we're just going to call them the untouchables. That's where I'm pushing for that. So with all this support and with everybody sort of moralizing what Luigi Mangione has done, did you hear about the terrorism charge they're putting against him?
No.
Okay, so this is kind of comes from like the newest information we have. Like to close, if we're going to close out this episode, let's do it in style, which is what are they going to try to like charge him with? Because they can't be like, well, you killed somebody, but half of us agree with it, so you can be let go. The powers that be are trying to make it the worst crime in the world. They are looking at this not just as he had the audacity to shoot somebody, like if he shot anybody else on the street, you or me, it would just be a murder charge, just plain and simple.
What pops it up to an assassination? Do you have to be somebody that everybody knows or worth a certain amount of money or something?
Oh, worse than assassination. So if the prosecutor was pursuing murder 2, which is just murder, it's just like somebody gets angry at you or I and shoots us in the street. Joe dies, and the assassin goes up on trial. That's murder 2. Which can be paroled after a couple of decades. That's Shawshank Redemption. It's when somebody's like, well, I was a dumb kid, I killed somebody, but now I feel like I'm rehabilitated and I'm ready to walk among society. Bumping it up to what you're talking about, assassination, that is murder 1. That's premeditated. You can't be paroled from that, and it can come with the death penalty. So like that was the next level they were going to pursue. They were like, okay, it's not murder 2. He obviously meant to do this, and it was premeditated. So to make it more difficult for the prosecution, they're like, it's assassination. We don't want this kid to be paroled. Possibly we want him to face the death sentence. We want this to be severe. And then to get headlines, they bumped it up to terrorism. Now, terrorism is a step too far, not because I agree with the murder of a CEO. Terrorism is a step too far because it's going to be much harder to prove. To prove that he is attempting terrorism. Terrorism is reserved for trying to coerce or scare the public by intimidation, and change policy by intimidation.
I think that fits. I do, right?
True, but it has to be direct intimidation. Like the thing that people are I when I originally read this, I was like, yeah, of course, he is trying to intimidate CEOs and UnitedHealthcare and other healthcare agencies into changing their ways. That is intimidation. That is a terrorist. But then I read deeper into it and it was like, oh no, you have to be afraid of that terrorist and their organization personally. Like when 9/11 happened and the Twin Towers were bombed and we started hearing about anthrax going out in the mail through envelopes, I got scared. I was like, holy shit, I was working security for like a major company. We could have received an envelope full of powder.
Yeah, no,
it counted as terrorist because I was like,
you're secure. They're going to make you open it.
Yeah. But your average citizen was scared. Your average person was Googling, what do these organizations want? What do these terrorists want? What do they got against us? This is not the same. To my reading, to my layman's reading, terrorism means like to fit that definition, it has to be an intimidation directly to the people. So like, I don't think any of the average person is like, oh my God, what if a Guy Fawkes style anti-CEO murderer steps out and shoots me because I have a small business worth, $500,000 a month. Like that's not, nobody's afraid of that. Everybody is like thinking, who's the next CEO that's going to get shot? Nobody's thinking that it's, going to coerce them directly. I think they might get it. I think that in the right court with the right prosecutor, they may be able to push the terrorism aspect of it. But I also don't think this classically fits my definition of terrorism, just me as a person. When you think of terrorism, have you ever thought, oh yeah, somebody born and raised in their own country shoots a politician or a CEO? Have we ever labeled that as terrorism before?
Well, I know it's a broad statement. I had a friend from Colombia, and he, in a jealous rage, keyed his girlfriend's car, and he was charged with terrorism. So
no way.
So, needless to say, with the company I keep, I'm not surprised. It does fit what you said. No, it doesn't fit the typical that we think of the ISIS. No, I'll give you that.
Yeah. I agree with on both sides of the political spectrum. There has been suspicion that the terrorism charge was tacked onto it for headlines, just to sort of like make this seem as high gravity as possible. But they also may have made a huge mistake in doing that, because to prove terrorism, you have to prove intent. To prove intent, you allow the witness to go on the stand. And that means that to prove all this shit that they're putting into this, they're going to have to let Luigi Mangione go up and talk, and to give him basically the world's biggest soapbox, which could lead to jury nullification. Say he stands on trial and he's charming as hell, and the jury is like, yeah, we like him. Like, we don't, he murdered, but we like him. Like, that could actually sway a jury to nullify.
He certainly has the brains for it. If you read his, his education and what he's done.
Yeah, that's my fear, is that other assassins in the past who have killed presidents, or who have attempted to murder presidents, or who have killed politicians, we always read about the Arthur Bremmers of the world, where they're actual sociopaths. Like, they are hard to like, they're emotionally stunted, they're very difficult to listen to. They give you the creeps when they talk. That's not the case with this guy. This guy is extraordinarily charming and educated.
Yeah, this is a guy that you have screensavers. He looks like a model. His shirt off with muscles, and
yeah,
he's gonna have more girlfriends than anyone now. These guys, more than
Right.
Ted Bundy could even dream of.
I agree, and so my question now is that what we want? And do you think anything's going to change about this? I think actually that might be the more valuable question, is even if we try him for terrorism, do you see this changing for the positive, as far as like how the public views healthcare, how the public views murder? Has this changed your morals at all?
I think it's to the tipping point. I think what's going to have to happen is what you just said, him on his soapbox and him becoming a political person by saying and writing, and through his network of all this attention that he's got. If he can keep this attention and spread the word of his cause this way, I think yes. But if it's just about him going to jail or getting off, I don't think that's enough. I think this has to be the break of some kind of movement.
I think it's too far away from the main problem to be a serious change. I think that we have read stories before about companies that get shamed into behaving themselves, but none of those companies have ever had the support of the U.S. government on their side. Like, they've never been this sponsored. They've never been this well paid off.
I think the only one that even comes close is tobacco, and they're just going to change how they do it. They're not going to stop what they're doing. They're going to change how the appearance of it, right? They're going to put on warnings, or or music that swear. It's really going to be superficial if they do.
Yeah. I think what would have probably been more effective somehow is if we drew more attention to the amount of money going into politics and lobbyists, and the amount of money being paid to the people making laws that affect our health.
It's still going to be profits over patients, I promise.
Yeah. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people will make that 1+1 connection where they're like, how do we change this healthcare system now that we're paying attention to it? Oh, we can't. And maybe everybody will come to the same conclusion and feel as frustrated. But I don't think we do that many steps in our mind. I think everyone's going to look at Luigi Mangione and say, that's crazy, and not know what to do, and just sort of trudge forward to the next issue.
I do want to leave it on this. Luigi's mom was questioned about what was going on without directly saying that it was her son, but that they had some suspicions. And do you know what her quote was?
What?
Sounds like something my son would do.
Oh, that is not what I expect from a killer's mother. They're always like, not my baby.
Yeah, he would never, right? Sounds like something he would do. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.reengineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, feedback, and blog articles for each of our episodes.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.